Okay, hi Vaughn. This is Alberto Brandolini from Avanscoperta. We have honor to have Vaughn Vernon here with us. Hi Vaughn.
Hey Alberto, how are you?
All good, all good, all good on your side.
Yeah, we're I guess we're 9 hours apart right now. Currently in Arizona, we're on the same clock time as California.
Okay.
Yeah, so that puts us about 9 hours apart, I think.
And how hot is in Arizona right now?
This has been a very mild week for this time of year in Arizona. It's been in the Fahrenheit 80s. I can't convert on the fly. What is that in Celsius? But if anyone's interested, you can look it up. But it wouldn't be unusual to have 100-degree weather already. So it's a nice break. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's get technical or nerdy. What are you doing right now? What is your current focus, your latest interest?
Yeah. Well, I still teach my workshops, of course, and consult around DDD, but my real, excitement right now is around Vlingo, which is a platform. You would call it a reactive platform. It's built on top of actors, the actor model. And this is something that I've spoken about for a long time. It's probably somewhere near 6 years that I've been speaking about using the actor model with domain-driven design. And also what this kind of represents, I'm a little bit hesitant to say this, but as I've taught over the years, people have told me repeatedly in almost every workshop, where is there, or I receive emails, where is there a framework that can help us use domain-driven design? And the reason I'm hesitant to do that is because, is there really a DDD framework? I think it's pretty clear that DDD is versatile enough that it would be difficult to create a one-size-fits-all framework. But on the other hand, there are a lot of frameworks out there that don't really help you with domain-driven design at all. And so my goal with Vlingo is to assist with domain-driven design. In other words, don't get in the way, but is it purely a domain-driven design framework? I don't think you would call it that, but it's probably somewhere in the middle. It's a helpful tool. It certainly enables you to do things with domain-driven design, but a very important thrust is that it's reactive and it's working on the actor model. So everything is asynchronous, or we could say concurrent or even parallel. And whether you're talking about a cluster or whether you're talking about the directory services or the HTTP server within and so forth, it's all reactive. So it's all message driven. It's all very highly scalable, and
good.
Yeah, and the actors ultimately can represent some very common objects that are used within domain-driven design.
Yeah, well, both for aggregates and policies makes a lot of sense. And actually, there is this continuous dichotomy, like in the community, like there's the trend of, well, you don't need a framework, which is true in some cases, but then on the other hand, like I've seen also so many teams that were sucked by reinventing the wheel and then put in trouble because they ended up redesigning transaction management and the building blocks of event sourcing, and it's not rocket science, but to bring your proof of concept implement might be suicidal. So actually, one of my latest suggestions was, well, make your proof of concept, learn all the basics, make sure you can make it work, you can understand the mechanics. Maybe that's not the code you want to bring in production. There are problems that have already a sophisticated solution. Reinventing exactly that solution might not be the best way. And the other thing is redesigning the basics is fantastic for a meetup. But that might not be the reason why your boss is paying you. You're paid to solve domain problems in the most efficient and reliable way, and not to reinvent a good solution. It's probably you need both. You need to get your hands dirty, drill, build the basics, and then choose accordingly which might be the best fit for your scenario.
And then the reactive aspect of it really takes us to the point where we find ourselves today in whether it's cloud computing or just thinking about web applications, is that we're not getting faster single cores anymore, but what we're getting is more cores. And if you really want to utilize the machine to the full, the server to the full, then you have to use multi-threading. And multi-threading is difficult, but the actor model makes it fairly straightforward. You still, need to think about asynchrony, but it's definitely not a heavy lifting asynchronous environment.
Yep. No, just really looks like a perfect fit. Just managed by the platform, and then they needed services for. Be free to think only about the domain. No, actually makes a lot of sense. And we actually already crossed the line, because we started talking about the learning, and we were both involved in interesting Twitter conversation in the last days about what might be the best learning path for domain-driven design in 2018. And can you tell us something about it?
So last week, I think it was the 9th or 10th of May 2018, I spoke at the Saturn conference, which is a conference that's put on by the Carnegie Mellon University. I guess it's the Software Engineering Institute, SEI, they're known as. And so I was there speaking, and unfortunately, I didn't recognize that there was a DDD proponent sitting right in front of me in the audience was Daniel Bryant, and I've always wanted to meet him, and I have only seen his Twitter avatar, I guess, and so he seemed familiar, but I didn't really know who he is. Anyway, I didn't get to meet him. We actually tried to meet up after, when I saw his tweet about a statement I made in my talk. So we'll try to meet up another time somehow. In any event, the tweet that he provided with a quote of my statement was very brief, and it went something like this. If someone says they're doing domain-driven design and you ask them, what is the name of your domain expert, and you can't give them an answer, you're probably not doing domain-driven design. And, I think that's fairly accurate, but it's not a popular statement to make for people who think they're doing domain-driven design, but they're using mainly the tactical patterns. And so I guess it kind of stepped on some toes, which was not my intention. And if you had heard my entire lead-in to this statement, I even said I don't want to sound offensive, because I know that this statement could be taken as sort of, who knows what, maybe an exclusive kind of statement or elitist kind of statement, which I never want to sound like. But that's why I led in with, now, here comes some turbulence. That was sort of like the captain saying, make sure your seatbelts are on. We're going to have about a few minutes of turbulence, and that's what it ended up being. So I retweeted Daniel Bryant's tweet, and there we have it. This turned into, I don't know, at least many hundreds of replies and conversations and things, and it went all the way to DC Comics, I think.
Yeah. We ended up in that territory, but that was not the initial goal, I guess.
No, but that's funny, and it's fun how things end up, right? But in the end, I think everyone in the DDD community is really just trying to help.
Yep.
And so take this as a helpful statement, and don't take it as discouragement. It's just simply, well, okay, if you're not doing that, then we need to find creative ways to make it rewarding for domain experts to be involved in this. And I think, like I suggested, event storming is one of those things that can get domain experts involved and make it fun.
Yep. Well, clearly I have interest in that thing, but there's probably something deeper here, which is for many years we assumed that the wrong path for domain-driven design was just reading the little book DDD quickly, focusing only on the tactical patterns, try to put repositories everywhere, and this was the default beginner trapped in the wrong perception of domain-driven design. This might not be longer the case. Now, probably the learning path, the new learning path for domain-driven design might be something entirely different. A lot of people are getting to domain-driven design from the microservices community, and the first thing they talk about is now bounded context. And I don't know what is their bounded context. We have flame wars also. Is the microservices a bounded context, and so on? Because one thing is a deployment unit, one thing is a language unit, language consistency unit. But well, the imaginary DDD learner on the wrong path might be coming from a different, and yeah, maybe it's something that we need to catch, intercept, and in breaking some assumption, I guess.
I think a few important things have happened. For one, I think the reason that people are being alerted to domain-driven design because of microservices could be mostly because of Sam Newman's book, Building Microservices. In the very early part of that book, he talks about Eric's book quite a bit, or at least domain-driven design, and references Eric's book. And he talks about bounded contexts. And then he also references my book. I think in the same chapter, I don't remember exactly, but so that's been, and the reason he referenced my book is I think he said something like, for practical examples about how to actually implement this, take a look at Vaughn Vernon's book, Implementing Domain-Driven Design. But so I think that's taken us part way there, but sort of I wonder what bounded context means there, and I've had some brief, well, I don't even know if they were conversations with Sam, but I read some tweets with Sam, and I think I or someone was asking, well, how do you gauge the size of a bounded context? If you're saying that a bounded context is a good microservice, or vice versa, how do you gauge the size of that? And the answer was, well, it just sort of starts feeling too big and too busy, and so I'll break some things out into another service. And that is actually, well, maybe not purely what domain-driven design would say. It would say more, well, recognize the linguistic boundaries, right? That there are drivers that are showing you that these things don't belong in this bounded context while others do, and then find a home for the other ones based on the language. And so I think that's part of maybe a little bit of confusion, but we owe a lot to Sam for just making people aware of bounded context. So that's,
yep.
I'm not finding
And
fault.
then the 7 different layers,
Yeah.
they are subjected to, well, actually to similar forces, because the organization is shaping the language. But while talking with Russ Miles about microservices, he was talking not only about the unit of deployment, because the actual most manageable size, the Darwinian selection applied on this one, is actually around the unit of responsibility and around the business capability that tends to be managed by a single team talking with a well-defined stakeholders. And so, well, actually the language is shaped by this collaboration, and the responsibility is just affecting the size of deployment and the size of the language. But that is actually a rule of thumb. It just might not exactly coincidence, but it really depends on manageability for different. I would say you might have a mobile app having the same language of web portion of the same service. They're independently deployed, but they're clearly part of the same conversation, and the language has to be consistent. All okay, just like if we are not dogmatic in applying rules, everything is manageable. If we are strict, another thing.
I think there is a tendency to be able to see those natural divisions within departments or work responsibilities. But what's funny is I also find that even within what appears to be clearly a boundary within a work segment, that different domain experts speak about the same thing in different ways. They're the same word, the same term in different ways. And so what do you do about that? That's probably a different bounded context. Maybe it's showing you that there are two contexts, or maybe the other context isn't really necessary for the job that you're trying, the delivery that you're trying to make. So,
Yep. For me, one of the trickiest areas is just like I'm talking with one person with one purpose, but then the purpose, the purpose is the thing that for me defines the ideal size of the model. Consistent bounded context has a well specific purpose, optimal model for optimal purpose. But then you talk with people, single person, single department, so you're clearly within something that's already well framed. Then their purpose is we got to manage this. Well, manage is not a purpose, and then I ended up many times shopping between maybe a design phase and the execution and a tracking phase, managed by the same person in the same department with different roles. And that's usually really hard for some people to scope, because they are clearly talking about the same data, just at different moments of the data lifecycle, and their purpose is managing. And no, that's a can be misleading word.
Well, and what's really difficult for them to accept is because they've walked into the room with the idea that they knew what they were doing. They already had this idea in mind, and as soon as you introduce something different, wait a minute, that's, they're not prepared for the chance that this might happen.
Yep. No, and then you have two very simple trivial model, and within the same box, and then you're just gonna make it look from the outside that it's exactly the same box, the box that manages things, but has different purposes and independent model for different specialized purposes. Now that's really tricky, but sometimes you can make the simplicity pop up like, whoa, that's beautiful, and it's finished. Let's start making a new model for the next problem, because this one is solved. Let's seal it. It's fun, but I agree with you. It's hard to manage the surprise.
And sometimes I'm even asked the question, why is it driven by language? And actually, sometimes it's, yeah, that's a great question, but give me an alternative. Actually, I think that's something that Eric accomplished with domain-driven design, that because there is no other way other than intuition or gut feeling or whatever, and that's so subjective, whereas language is very explicit, right? It's just, it is a way to think about this, and as soon as you see the data or the shape of the data or the behaviors around the data changing, let's not try to put those together because it's a different thing. And it's, at a very minimum, it's a definite guideline to go by, and I think that's what the software industry is missing most time.
Yeah, but I had the similar thing, and my reasoning was again, why language? Well, language is fuzzy. Language is exactly where you can't draw the precise thing because of its intrinsic ambiguity. But at the same time, the language is the most sensible thing. All the possible influences by people turnover, department's boundary, language version, software version, and so on, they all reflect in the language. So you see the mass, but that's a very sensible indicator. Every fluctuation in the environment just reflects in the language, if you're sensible enough to listen to that. But then it takes gut feeling. And
well, and I think there is always a bit of gut feeling that you have to use, but then if the gut feeling ends up seeming wrong later, you can always change that. Right? So, and then the other thing is too, even if there are definite differences in the language of a monolith, right? Let's say, I don't know, let me just choose an example like insurance, and we have the core of insurance. We need to insure people, let's say for healthcare, yeah? And so there's this sort of core around, we really need to help people get insured. And maybe they're disadvantaged people financially, and we need to help them. Okay, that's sort of our core, and we also need to step them through a process for qualifying and make sure that we do have all the proper information for qualifying. But also around that is, you know, we need to actually collect money from the U.S. government in behalf of these individuals who are disadvantaged, and we have, you know, I don't know, it's difficult maybe to come up with all the ancillary, you know, things around it. But the problem with not taking each of those linguistically and still putting them in the monolith, even though it appears that they are distinct and different within the monolith, they are still not segregated or compartmentalized, and therefore it still becomes a tangled mess, even when the language itself is distinct within the monolith, or languages, I should say. And so, you know, if you're going to avoid that, some very definite boundaries are going to help a lot.
Yeah, the moment you were describing it, I just realized that the actually great result is the confidence. You don't have to master all the mass, because even if the design is clean, still there are so many things that look like moving parts, and you're never completely sure you're not breaking things. While I realized that the great feeling, the great part of the doing DDD thing is just like, I know I can move things around. I'm safe. I can create a new model. I can change this model. Nothing is going to break. Or if something is going to break, it's going to be inside this boundary. It's going to be clearly me, and I can roll it back. So I feel safe. I can try something different. Actually, the worst feeling about not doing the DDD is just when you stop trying the experiment. You postpone. You don't feel like, oh, well, that's going to be dangerous. Oh, well, maybe not. And this maybe not is the opposite.
And the good thing about, even if you do make a breaking change to collaborating bounded contexts, the events point that out. The events change, and it is a clear indicator, okay, this is going to have an impact on one or more other, you know, bounded contexts, and it just speaks to you immediately. You know, if you're really thinking about what's happening, you're going to know that whatever your sort of alerting mechanism is for talking to other teams, you say, look, this is changing, and they can prepare for it.
Awesome, awesome. I got just one more thing to ask. Like, we've been together in the same class a few times in, yeah, I think it was 5 years ago, 2013. Am I right? Or later?
Yeah, so, yep.
And that was fun. I mean, it was one of the times that I got a fantastic stage from my early experiments with EventStorming, and it actually was a blast for me, and it was yeah, great fun. And what's changed in your class, in your teaching style, in your you have new format and new stuff like
yeah. So obviously I refined my workshop. I got a lot of feedback, even though I would say overall it was a success. Well, you know, the first 10 times you do something, people are going to have a lot of input, and I've obviously made changes around that. The other thing is that the original domain that I worked around, as in the full sort of business domain, was the same one from my red book, which is this fictitious company SaaS Ovation, and they're building some very technical, you know, tools for technical teams, for developers. Well, not always just developers, but their agile project management context, or what was it called, Project Ovation or something like that, you know, is more of something that programmers can understand, which I think is good for the book. But a lot of the feedback that I got was, yeah, but we aren't creating models for developers. We're creating models for banks and you know, whatever. So so that's changed, and what I've done is shifted to also not really, you know, I guess like certainly not banking, but what I have picked up is a domain around peer-to-peer commerce. So, and what that means is, yes, it's e-commerce, but it's not just buying books and clothing and, you know, Band-Aids and whatever off of a website. It's really putting people together and thinking about all the dynamics around getting two people who don't know each other to agree on, I have a job that needs to be done, and I have the ability to do that job for you. And what's everything that could go right around that, but also what's everything that could go wrong around that? And how do you really think deeply and model deeply around solving the problems of what could go wrong? And I think those are the sort of corner cases that don't come to mind when you're first thinking about the problem. But when you start diving in and saying, okay, if you have a group of, let's say, you know, what we would call preferred workers who are going to do this job because we vetted them in some way, what are the weird things that can happen around network latency? Or, you know, you have these preferred doers, and you push notifications to them, and one of them is out of range just after they receive the notification, and they try to accept the job. You know, yes, I accept this job, but they're out of range. And how do you keep from developing a bad relationship with them because you didn't receive their acceptance, and now you open up to people who aren't vetted because no one was accepting the work, and now you open it to others who aren't preferred but can still probably get the job done? What dynamics does that show, and how can you make sure everybody stays, well, maybe not entirely happy, but they don't drag your business through the dirt because, you know, you didn't treat them correctly? That's just one scenario, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. It's crossing the line between technical complexity and the real domain problem. It's just like, yeah, this miscommunication on the channel actually created a dirty state at the business level relationship, and so it's just like yeah, corner cases, and that's part of the game. It's not like you do this, then you do the job and get paid. End of the story. Oh yes, that's not the story.
No, that's the very, very ultimate happy path, right? We wish that it worked that way every single time, but if we did, then high school students could write that code.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so we can estimate as high school students and then get the production.
Yeah, there you go. Let's just go back to child labor.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I'm just checking, and we're basically finishing our time, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to see you soon here in Italy, and yeah, and have some good time in the classroom, good insights, and yeah, everything that comes with it.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm always excited to return to Italy at any chance that I get, and the thing that's sad to me is I know how important the Italian language is to Italy. Yeah, there are more English speakers, but I really wish that I could address the class in Italian. It would be very nice, but I can't, and so I'll do the best I can with English.
I'll do my best with drawings while I'm there. So
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and it's great to have you in the workshop. And like I say, I teach event storming in the workshop, but event storming is not the workshop, and so it's a tool that we don't have 2 days to dig deeply into, but it's going to be great to have you there to refine some things and make some comments where we could use some help, and in other ways too, obviously.
We're going to make sure the stickies are orange. That's yes. That's the most important thing.
They are orange. I've corrected that. I don't know what happened, but when I left Belgium, what was that name of the city? Was anyway, my brain is not recalling the name of the Leuven is where we were, right? Yeah. When I left Leuven, for some reason, I had in my mind that events were yellow, and when your book arrived and I saw your book, and I was like, wait a minute, orange? I literally was in the throes of getting my distilled book released, and I said, stop everything. I have to correct this. And I went through and changed all the events to orange and the aggregates to yellow. So there, an honor to you.
That was not supposed to be an extra work. I'm just
no. It was just
for me not doing the extra work, but
yeah. So okay, very good.
So thank you again. Fantastic time, and yeah, hope to see you soon. So yeah,
we will see you very soon. Take care.
Yeah. Take care. Have a nice day.
Okay, ciao.
Ciao. Bye.